Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be going over the process of making a basic button. This is part of my overall effort to record the process of making various types of merchandise as I prepare for different conventions and just trying to push the boundaries of different merch ideas for my store. And this will be essentially a start to finish process because I do have a button machine. So I'm going to be printing and pressing buttons today. For other similar videos like this, I may just stop short at the paper prototype because they need to be sent off to a manufacturer for the final result. But you should be able to see how it goes from an idea to the execution. With that said, just going over the high level, there's different styles of buttons that you'll see out there in the market today. And the most consistent ones that I see, like the circle, the square, the heart, and the star shape. There are some buttons out there that are cut with a very unique shape. For example, these idle buttons that I have, they're basically cut out around the character. And while that's pretty impressive, it would be a pretty expensive process to do because buttons require pressing into a die, which is basically a block, to provide the shape. And when you have a custom shape like that, you're going to have to pay for a whole new die in order to shape the button accordingly. And so that may be a expense that you want to consider before you pursue a custom shape. The circles, squares, hearts are relatively easy to come by on the market. The star shape ones are a little bit harder, but it's definitely worth looking out for. And since I do 3D models for my overall art style, I'm going to be making use of those 3D models as well for these buttons. That way there's a bit of a consistent style with it. Now I want to make a quick point here. Typically on these buttons, you're talking about a size of anywhere between 1 to 3 inches. And so that's a pretty small overall canvas to work with. And you don't want to load up with too many details, which is often why you will see chibi styles on these buttons. That's not to say that you shouldn't consider trying full body or other artistic renditions. It's just you have a very small surface area to display your art, and you'll want to focus on the styles that will show up well at distance. You know, someone's walking by, they're looking at your button, they come closer and start up a conversation. You want those details to be somewhat recognizable from a distance, and that usually means simplification. Another important thing that I want to note here, talking about the overall templating process, typically with these buttons, they're pretty standard sizes. One of my recommendations is when you're looking into making merchandise is taking a look at the different merchandise manufacturers that are out there, such as Fograys, Sap Creative, etc. Oftentimes, they will have a template for making that type of merchandise on their website available for download. And the reason why I say take advantage of this is that these people have been doing this work for literal years beyond those. Taking advantage of their templates, they will have gone through some of the process for themselves and realized some of the issues with the design process for making those merchandise. So as you can see here on the screen, we have a template which I pulled from Grace for a basic button, and there's a couple rings on there. The very outer ring, the middle ring, and the inner ring. The inner ring is going to be essentially the flat area of your button where you get the most design out of the entire button. And then in between that ring and the middle ring, that's the wrap around. So you'll want to avoid putting any particular design elements that are important near or around in between those rings, because they're going to wrap around the sides of a button and they may potentially get distorted. And this is especially important if you have text, because it's either going to get cut off partway visually or it's going to wrap around and get distorted. So you want to make sure there's some clearance there and all of those critical elements are within the inner ring for the best effect on the buttons. And then in between the middle ring and the outer ring, that is the edge. So you'll want to make sure your design goes out to those edges, because that's going to wrap all the way down below the bottom of the button. And most people are not going to see whatever's on that side of a button when it's being worn or carried in a bag. So keep that in mind. And then one of the things that I'm going to be doing today with the buttons is also just overall templating it for myself. And I'm not talking about the shape, but I'm talking about the use of a background and how the layers are separated. So I can quickly add models and swap out the backgrounds accordingly and make the overall process of sending it off to a manufacturer later or to produce your own buttons easier in the long run, because everything's not merged onto the same layer and you have the option for variations on the button. So I'll take you through the process of setting up those templates and then just showing you what I have in mind for the buttons that I'm doing today. And towards the end of this process, I'll be talking about prototyping the buttons. Here I'm keeping it pretty simple for my button template. I've taken my models out of Blender and basically rendered them two different ways, because I was running some polls across the community and I asked them, what do you think of these different styles for the buttons? And these two styles were the ones that got the most votes, and so I decided to do a limited run of both of those buttons and then their corresponding variations. And I'll just list them in the store for a while, get a feel for how they do over time, or people interested in buying and using. And then from there, I can prioritize the ones that do sell well and then use that as my reference for future waves of buttons. There's a couple of different background styles that you could go for with the button. And for this time around, I just kept it simple because I want to test out the performance of these button styles first before I start introducing more fancy textures. And so I have a basic gradient, and then I enhance the curve a little bit with the soft brush. And I do plan to laminate all of these with the hollow laminates, and I think those will make the buttons really shine. As you can see here, I printed out the button designs that I've done, and I have two versions here. One is the button as a whole, and then the display area of the buttons. Why did I bother to print this out? Well, that's because it gives you a better idea of how, one, the button itself is going to be printed out, because printers work in CMYK instead of RGB, and so you can get a feel for what the colors are going to look like before you send it off to the manufacturer and spend all that money just to realize that no, the colors look terrible when converted through their printers. And then the other one is because of product sharding. I've mentioned this before, but you can take advantage of certain designs and see if it works as other product designs. So in this case, I'm looking at it and wondering if it might be good to try out as a sticker. So those will go up in the store at the same time once I'm done with all of this. Something that I also recommend is going out to the stores around you or ordering online and getting someone else assisted buttons to use as a reference for how things will wrap around. And with these paper prototypes, you can just put it on top of a button and then see for yourself how exactly it wraps around. So it's very useful just to have the paper version. Is a couple of cents at worst to do these prototypes, but it saves you a lot of headache in the long run. Let's talk packaging for a bit here. With the buttons, I have a couple of different cello bags that I want to use, and these are for the different styles of button packaging that I'm going to do. I'm going to do singles and sets, and the reason why I'm doing this is some people will prefer having a single button, and then there are people who prefer to collect the whole set, and having that option there could help your overall sales because you can just roll in some of the discounts from the start there if you wanted. And so for the buttons, I'm doing the 3x4, and then for the sets, I'm doing a 4x6. And then I'll also print out backing cards for all of these buttons and keep them kind of separate so you can just easily slip them in, and then seal the packaging before you ship it. Some people will prefer to pre-pack their buttons. Some manufacturers will support it. For me personally, it's about inventory efficiency. Being able to share the buttons between the individual and the sets and not have to worry about running out of one type too soon before the others. A important thought that I had about this is whether you should consider a generic packaging versus a customized packaging. And what I mean by this is whether you design a individual backing card for each button, or you just have a very generic one that applies to basically any button. And my personal preference is to do the customized ones because it adds a little bit more color to your overall collection. But if you're short on time or resources, it does make sense to do a generic one style for every single button. As part of a template to support the customized style, I have the text layers and the background layers broken out. That way I can just take advantage of Clip Studio Paint and do a clipping layer on top of these so I can apply specific styles, colors to the template. So it'll be very quick to make these and turn them over. And then with the clipping layers, you can also do layer effects. So that's how I'm getting these nice borders around the text. They help it stand out against the background. For the backing card, I have the name of a character that's on the button, the type of button it is, and this gives me a little bit of flexibility to take the template into something like, oh, I want to do earrings, or I want to do some kind of jewelry or hair ties or some other merch types. I can just adjust these things accordingly without having to make a whole new card for it. And then on the bottom, I have my socials. So it's easy for someone to look at the card later and follow you on those socials. Or the backside, I'm just going to keep it simple and do the color from a background on that side instead of worrying about any additional text to put on that side for now. In the future, I may use a backside similar to a business card with QR codes or additional information about the store. But I already have thank you cards that I'll be including in the packages that go out to my customer anyway. So it's a bit of extra effort that I don't need right now. A cool tip that I found out a while back about some of these smaller products is that you can actually buy these hanger tabs, which are just little pieces of plastic cut out a specific way so you can peel off a part of it and then stick it to your overall packaging. That way it can hang. And I think this is really useful for self-serve type of setups. If you're just keeping these in your online inventory, then these aren't really necessary. Or if you're keeping them behind the desk behind the table at the convention and people just call out what they want from you, then you don't really need those there as well. But I personally prefer self-serve as much as I can. And so I'll be using these when I take these buttons to conventions. Let's talk about the fun stuff, shall we? The money. So these buttons are typically a low-cost item. I will say that my cost to make one of these buttons, including labor and all, is probably about $1.50, and that is 2025 prices, okay? If you're coming from the future You might think these are incredibly low or incredibly high, depending on how things change over time in the economic conditions. The buttons themselves are typically a low cost item. They're good to have for your store or your booth because it's an easy way for someone to get a taste for your work and provide a little bit of support without committing to a larger purchase, for example, like a print or commissions. And you can also bump up the prices a little bit if you do something like include a hollow laminate like I am with the buttons themselves just to make them extra shiny, but totally optional. What I've seen in 2025 is depending on the size of a button, the overall art style, and whether you put some kind of laminate on it, the buttons tend to fall somewhere in between the $3 and $8 range. And given the cost to produce, that's not bad at all. And there you have it. That's a basic process of taking a button from start to finish. And I think buttons are a great way to round out a collection. You can do a lot with them. You can make attaché bags, you can make fridge magnets, and so on with these buttons. It's a nice low cost way for your customers to support you as an artist. And it's very easy to make these days. It's a small amount of artwork to make a good impact. So if you're just starting out, this may be one of the things that you pursue in the short term. That way you can take your art style and spread it out across several different products instead of just doing only stickers like I did for my first convention. I hope this encourages you to give these buttons a try, make some for yourself, and I would love to hear more about the different buttons that you've tried and what worked well for you and what didn't. So let me know in the comments below. And that'll be it until next time.